Kiki's last stand. Somewhere in Guadalajara, a police officer tied to a chair with broken ribs and punctured skull begged for death, and for 30 hours it never came. But how did he get there? Well, it all started when the February sun hung heavy over Guadalajara, Mexico. The streets pulsed with life, vendors shouting, children laughing, and the smoky scent of grilled meat curling through the air. Among the crowd walked DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, a husband, a father of three, just heading out for lunch with his wife. It was supposed to be a normal day, just one meal away from the job that had consumed him. You see, for months, Kiki had been methodically tearing through the Guadalajara's cartel's empire, burning fields, intercepting shipments, exposing names that were never meant to be spoken aloud. And in a city like this, that kind of work doesn't go unnoticed. Kiki was enjoying the day, but what he didn't notice was the sedan idling 3 cars down and the way 5 men track his every step. When Kiki reached the sedan, 5 men moved in. A hand grabbed his arm, a cloth pressed to his face, and the world went dark before he could scream. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the crowd, watching, pretending not to see. When Kiki woke, he was tied to a chair in a house on Lope de Vega Street. The air smelled of mildew, sweat, and something metallic. Around him stood cartel enforcers, and shockingly, men in uniform. Policemen, officials, people who had sworn the same oath he had. For the next 30 hours, they took turns asking questions, and between each question came the sound of ribs breaking, one after another. When Kiki started to faint, they injected him with stimulants to keep him awake. He wasn't allowed to mercy of passing out. They wanted him to feel everything. When all the ribs were broken, they picked up a rusted rebar rod and pressed it into his skull until bone cracked like dry wood. His screams rasped into whispers and then silence. His voice gone. Just next door, his pilot and friend Alfredo Zavala endured the same torture. They wanted information, but by the end, it wasn't about that anymore. It was about power. About showing what happens to anyone who tries to challenge it, who tries to challenge cartels. Weeks later, farmers in a remote Michoacan field stumbled upon a plastic-wrapped bundles that carrion birds had been circling. Inside were Kiki and Alfredo, what remained of them. The discovery ignited international outrage and massive investigations. But for those who found the bodies, the image would never fade. 2 men who'd fought the darkness consumed by it. The East Village Execution. January 1972. New York City's East Village was bone cold that night. The kind of cold that turns your breath to fog and your fingertips to glass. NYPD officers Gregory Foster, 22, and Rocco Lowry, 25, walked their nightly beat. Both were Vietnam veterans, partners, brothers, men used to danger, but not what waited that night. As they moved down Avenue B, they passed a parked car and a man standing beside it. Foster asked a simple question about the vehicle. The man said nothing. They shrugged and kept walking. That's when 3 figures stepped out from the shadows. Members of the Black Liberation Army had been tracking the pair for blocks, waiting for the perfect moment. Their boots were silent on the icy concrete. Their hands were steady on their weapons. When they were close enough to see the steam rising from the officers' colors, they opened fire. 8 bullets tore into Foster's back before he even turned. The impact threw him to the pavement, his body twisting on the icy ground. Laurie spun, reaching for his weapon, but 6 rounds ripped through his arms and legs. He staggered forward, one hand pressed to his throat, the other reaching for his partner. But the ambush wasn't finished. The attackers advanced. One of them moved closer, stood over Foster, and fired 3 rounds directly into his eyes. Another shouted, "Shoot him in the balls!" And he did. Blood streamed against the frozen sidewalk, spreading until it stopped moving. Then came the laughter. The killers danced over the bodies, kicking snow, firing shots into the air like it was a celebration. By the time backup arrived, the street was silent again. Just 2 forms in blue, lying under the streetlights, one face shattered, the other full of holes that no longer bled. Investigators later tied the murders to Ronald Carter and Twyman Mayers of the BLA. But even in a city built on violence, this one stood out. It remains one of the most brutal cop assassinations in NYPD history. The Onion Field Nightmare. March 9th, 1963. Hollywood was quiet under a thin layer of fog. Neon lights reflected off wet pavement as 2 LAPD officers Ian Campbell and Carl Hedinger patrolled their usual route. They pulled over a suspicious car. Inside were two men, Gregory Powell and Jimmy Smith, both career criminals, both too calm for comfort. Campbell approached the driver's side, keeping his hand on the holster. "Evening," he said. "Mind showing your license?" Powell nodded, smiling faintly. Then his left hand reached for the door handle. His right hand, unseen, slipped to the floor mat and picked something up. When the door opened, the gun in his hand was already pressed to Campbell's ribs. Hedinger turned to them quickly and tried to use his gun, but Campbell said, "He has a gun in my bag. Give him your gun." Seconds later, both officers were disarmed and shoved into the suspect's car. The city faded behind them as they drove north toward Bakersfield, toward silence, darkness, and the smell of soil. The car stopped in the middle of an onion field. Powell ordered them out. The mud sucked at their shoes as they walked. The moon hovered low, pale as a headlight. "On your knees," Powell said. Campbell obeyed. Hedinger hesitated, then joined him. For a brief second, they looked at each other. No words, just the silent understanding of men who know it's over. The first bullet entered through Campbell's mouth. 4 more followed, tearing through his chest and lungs. He fell first into the cold dirt. Hedinger ran. Shots cracked through the night, whizzing past his ears. But he didn't stop. He ran until the smell of onions faded into dry wind, until the world blurred and every breath felt stolen. When police found Campbell's body the next morning, the blood had turned the soil black. Friendly fire. Chicago 2025. A night like any other, wet asphalt, flashing lights, and radios cracking through static. Officer Crystal Rivera and her partner chased a suspect through Chatham's narrow back streets. Rain dripped off rooftops, turning puddles into mirrors of red and blue. Rivera was 36, a 4-year veteran of the force and a mother of the 10-year-old girl. She'd always said that when you wear the badge, you carry 2 hearts, one for duty and one for the family waiting at home. You see, police work isn't only about danger. It's about trust. You trust your instincts. You trust your training, and most of all, you trust the person standing next to you. But sometimes, that trust breaks before you even realize it. As the pair entered a dimly lit hallway, a shape darted past. Rivera raised her gun. Her partner did too. A single shot rang out. Just one. When the echo faded, Rivera was on the floor, clutching her chest. The bullet had entered through her back. Her partner froze. Panic set in, and he radioed for help with shaking hands. When the help arrived, they threw her into a squad car and sped toward the hospital until the car stalled and caught fire in the rain. By the time another unit arrived, the engine was gone, and so was she. The department called it an accident, but for her partner, it wasn't an accident. It was a lifetime guilt. Cowards didn't build the peace and security we enjoy today. It was built by those who wore the badge, knowing the cost, those who stood between evil and the innocent, those who gave everything so we could sleep safely. Be good to everyone around you. Stay safe and have a good day.